What happens when a country music superstar walks onto one of daytime television's biggest stages, only to become the target of relentless attacks from a host who refuses to let him speak? It only took one comment about rural America for Sunny Hostin to ignite a firestorm that would end with Blake Shelton being escorted off the View, set in the most shocking exit in the show's history. The tension was instant. From the moment Blake Shelton settled into the guest chair, something felt off. The usual warmth and welcoming energy that greets most celebrities was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a coldness in the air, a sense that this interview was about to go somewhere dark. Whoopi Goldberg started things off with what seemed like a simple question. Blake, you've been pretty vocal about your love for small-town life. Do you think that perspective is out of touch with most Americans? Blake smiled, clearly trying to keep things light. Well, I don't know if it's out of touch. I just think there's value in the way people live outside the big cities. Hard work, community, taking care of your neighbors. That stuff matters. Before he could finish his thought, Sunny Hostin jumped in. Her voice was sharp, cutting. But Blake, isn't that just a romanticized version of reality? I mean, rural America has some serious issues. Education levels, healthcare access, poverty rates. Are we just supposed to ignore all that and pretend everything's perfect? Blake's smile faded just a bit. I'm not saying everything's perfect, Sunny. I'm just saying that people in small towns have values that... Values? Sunny interrupted again, her tone dripping with condescension. What values exactly? The values that reject progress? The values that keep people stuck in the past? The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Joy Behar glanced at Whoopi, clearly sensing this was escalating faster than anyone expected. Sarah Haynes looked down at her notes, unsure whether to jump in or stay quiet. Blake took a breath, trying to stay calm. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about things like family, faith, hard work. Those aren't backwards ideas, Sunny. They're just different from what you might be used to. Sunny leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Different or inferior? Because that's what it sounds like you're implying. That somehow your way of life is more authentic, more real than people who live in cities. I never said that, Blake replied, his voice getting firmer. You're putting words in my mouth. Am I? Sunny shot back. Because every time someone like you comes on this show and talks about real America, what you're really saying is that people like me, people who live in New York or Los Angeles, somehow don't count, that we're not real Americans. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice calm but authoritative. Okay, let's take a breath here. I think we're getting a little heated. But Sunny wasn't backing down. No, Whoopi, I think this is important. Blake needs to understand that his perspective isn't the only valid one. Rural America doesn't have a monopoly on American values. Blake's jaw tightened. I never said it did. But you're sitting here attacking me for simply saying that small-town life has value. Why is that so offensive to you? Because it's dismissive, Sunny snapped. It's dismissive of the millions of people who don't live that way. It's dismissive of diversity, of different cultures, of progress. Ana Navarro, who had been quiet up until this point, tried to lighten the mood. I think what Blake is trying to say is that there's room for all kinds of American experiences. Right, Blake? Blake nodded, grateful for the lifeline. Exactly. That's all I'm saying. I'm not attacking anyone's lifestyle. I'm just defending mine. But Sunny wasn't done. Your lifestyle? Blake, your lifestyle is funded by millions of people who don't live anywhere near a small town. You make your money in Nashville, in Los Angeles, in New York. You fly on private jets. You live in a mansion. Don't sit here and pretend you're just a simple country boy who lives a humble small-town life. The audience gasped. Several people in the crowd murmured in shock at how personal the attack had become. This wasn't about ideas anymore. This was personal. Blake's face flushed red. That's a low blow, Sunny. I've never pretended to be something I'm not. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma. I know what that life is like. Just because I've been successful doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from. Oh, please, Sunny said, waving her hand dismissively. You're selling a fantasy. You're selling this idea of small-town America to people who don't know any better. It's marketing, Blake. It's not real. Joy Behar finally spoke up, her voice uncertain. Sunny, I think maybe we should... No, Joy, Sunny interrupted. I'm tired of celebrities coming on this show and selling us these fake narratives. Blake Shelton is not a small-town guy anymore. He's a multi-millionaire who plays a character on television and in his music. And frankly, I find it insulting that he thinks we're all stupid enough to buy it. Blake stood up. The movement was sudden enough that it startled everyone at the table. His microphone pack pulled at his shirt, but he didn't care. I don't have to sit here and take this. Whoopi raised her hands. Blake, please, let's just... No, Whoopi, Blake said, his voice steady but filled with barely controlled anger. I came here to talk about my music, to have a conversation. I didn't come here to be attacked and insulted by someone who clearly has an agenda. Sunny stood up too, matching his energy. An agenda? My agenda is the truth, Blake. My agenda is calling out hypocrisy when I see it. You don't know anything about me, Blake said, pointing his finger. You don't know anything about my life or where I come from or what I believe. You've decided who I am based on your own prejudices, and that's exactly what you're accusing me of doing. The studio was dead silent. Camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The audience sat frozen, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Sarah Haynes tried to intervene. Maybe we can all just take a step back and... I don't need to take a step back, Sunny said. Blake is the one who came on this show, spouting his small-town superiority complex. That is not what I did. Blake's voice rose for the first time. I answered a question honestly. I shared my perspective, and you have done nothing but attack me for it from the second I sat down. Anna Navarro nodded slightly, seeming to agree with Blake's assessment, but she stayed quiet. Sunny crossed her arms. If you can't handle being challenged on your views, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Challenged? Blake let out a bitter laugh. You haven't challenged anything. You've just been rude and condescending. There's a difference between a challenging conversation and whatever this is. Whoopi stood up, trying to take control of the situation. Okay, we need to go to commercial. Everyone just take a breath. But Blake was already removing his microphone. I'm done here. I'm not doing this. Of course you're not, Sunny said with a smirk. Run back to your safe space where everyone agrees with you. Blake stopped. He turned to look at Sunny, his eyes blazing. You know what your problem is, Sunny. You can't stand that there are people in this country who think differently than you. You can't stand that your worldview isn't the only one. So instead of having a real conversation, you attack. You belittle. You try to make people feel small so you can feel big. Sunny's face went red. How dare you? I dare, Blake cut her off, because you've been doing it to me for the last 10 minutes, and I'm not going to stand here and let you do it anymore. Joy Behar looked at the producers off camera, silently pleading for someone to intervene. Sarah Haynes had her hand over her mouth in shock. Anna Navarro looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Whoopi stepped between Blake and Sunny. Blake, I understand you're upset, but let's not... I'm not upset, Whoopi, Blake said, his voice calmer now, but still firm. I'm disappointed. I've watched this show for years. I've seen you have tough conversations with people you disagree with. But this wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush. Sunny wasn't backing down. If asking you real questions is an ambush, then maybe your positions aren't as solid as you think they are. You didn't ask me real questions, Blake countered. You made assumptions about who I am and what I believe, and then you attacked those assumptions. You never once tried to actually understand my perspective. The audience was completely silent. Some people nodded in agreement with Blake. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure who to side with. Sarah Haynes finally found her voice. Blake, I think what Sunny was trying to say, maybe not in the best way, is that there are legitimate concerns about how rural America is sometimes portrayed versus the reality. Blake turned to Sarah, his expression softening slightly. And that would be a fair conversation to have, Sarah. But that's not what happened here. What happened here was I was attacked for simply saying that small-town values matter. That's it. That was my crime. Sunny scoffed. Oh, please don't play the victim. I'm not playing anything, Blake said. But you know what? I don't need to justify myself to you or anyone else. I know who I am. I know what I believe. And I know that I don't deserve to be treated the way you've treated me today. Whoopi put her hand on Blake's arm. Blake, I apologize if things got too heated. That wasn't our intention. Blake looked at Whoopi, and for a moment his expression softened. I appreciate that, Whoopi. I really do. But I can't stay here. This isn't healthy. This isn't productive. And frankly, I don't think your audience deserves to watch two people go at each other like this. Ana Navarro finally spoke up. Blake, for what it's worth, I think you've handled this with a lot of grace. Thank you, Ana, Blake said quietly. But Sunny couldn't let it go. Grace, he's running away because he can't defend his positions. Blake turned to face Sunny one last time. I'm not running away from anything, Sunny. I'm walking away from you. There's a difference. I've defended my positions just fine, but I can't defend them to someone who has no interest in actually listening. I listened, Sunny insisted. I just didn't agree. No, Blake said firmly. You didn't listen. You waited for your turn to talk. You had your talking points ready before I even opened my mouth. You decided who I was before you ever met me. That's not listening, Sunny. That's performing. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Several audience members gasped. Joy Bahar's eyes went wide. Even Whoopi looked taken aback by the directness of Blake's accusation. Sunny's face turned an even deeper shade of red. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Blake replied. I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone is more interested in making a point than having a conversation. And that's all this has been from the start. You making your point at my expense. A producer appeared from offstage, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Blake saw him and shook his head. It's okay, Blake said to the producer. I'm leaving. No need to make this more awkward than it already is. Whoopi tried one more time. Blake, please, let's just go to break, cool off, and come. Back fresh. Blake gave Whoopi a sad smile. Whoopi, you're a class act. You really are. But I can't do this. I won't do this. I have too much respect for myself and for your audience to participate in whatever this turned into. He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him, unsure whether they should be filming this or not. Sunny called after him. So you're just going to walk away? That's your big statement? Blake stopped at the edge of the stage. He didn't turn around. My big statement is that I refuse to be disrespected. My big statement is that I know my worth, and I won't let anyone make me feel less than, even on national television. And with that, he walked off the stage. The studio erupted. Some audience members applauded. Others sat in stunned silence. The hosts at the table looked at each other, none of them quite sure what to say or do next. Sunny sat down, her arms still crossed, her face still flushed with anger. Well, that was dramatic. Joy Behar let out a nervous laugh. Dramatic? Sunny, that was insane. He couldn't handle the heat, Sunny said defensively. But Ana Navarro shook her head. Sunny, I love you. But that wasn't heat. That was I don't even know what that was. Sarah Haynes spoke softly. I think maybe we crossed a line. Whoopi sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples. We need to go to commercial. Right now. As the commercial break music started playing, the hosts sat in uncomfortable silence. The audience buzzed with conversation, everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed. Backstage, Blake was met by his manager and publicist, both of whom looked equal parts concerned and furious. But Blake was calm, eerily calm. Are you okay? His manager asked. Blake nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm better than fine, actually. Blake, that's going to be everywhere, his publicist said. Every news outlet, every social media platform. This is going to be a huge story. Blake shrugged. Let it be a story. I did nothing wrong in there. I was respectful until I wasn't being respected. And even then, I didn't call her names. I didn't attack her personally. I just stood up for myself. His manager looked at him carefully. You're really okay? I'm really okay, Blake confirmed. I'm tired of people thinking they can treat other people however they want just because they disagree with them. I'm tired of the disrespect. I'm tired of the assumption that if you're from a small town, or if you have traditional values, that somehow makes you less intelligent or less worthy of respect. Back on the set, the commercial break was ending. The hosts had to compose themselves and figure out how to continue the show without their guest. Whoopi addressed the camera as they came back live. Well, as you all just saw, Blake Shelton has left the building, and I think we need to talk about what just happened. Joy Behar jumped in immediately. I think we need to acknowledge that things got way too heated, way too fast. Sunny was still defensive. I was just asking him tough questions. Sunny, Ana Navarro said gently but firmly, those weren't tough questions. That was an attack. And I say that as someone who loves you and respects you, but we have to be honest about what just happened. Sarah Haynes nodded in agreement. I felt uncomfortable watching it, and I was sitting right here. I can't imagine how the audience felt, or how Blake felt. Sunny looked around the table, clearly feeling ganged up on. So now everyone's on Blake's side? It's not about sides, Whoopi said tiredly. It's about how we treat our guests. We can disagree with people without being disrespectful. We can challenge people without attacking them personally. I didn't attack him personally, Sunny insisted. Joy Behar raised her eyebrows. Sunny, you called his entire lifestyle a marketing gimmick. You accused him of selling a fake narrative. That's pretty personal. The audience was watching this internal debate with rapt attention. This was almost as compelling as the confrontation with Blake had been. Ana Navarro spoke up again. Look, I think we all have strong opinions. That's what this show is about. But there's a way to express those opinions that invites conversation, and there's a way that shuts conversation down. What happened with Blake was the latter. Sunny sat back in her chair, her arms still crossed. She looked hurt, but also stubborn. I stand by what I said. Maybe I could have said it differently, but the substance of my points was valid. The substance might have been valid, Sarah Haynes said carefully, but the delivery made it impossible for Blake to even engage with the substance. He was too busy defending himself from personal attacks. Whoopi looked directly at the camera. I want to apologize to Blake Shelton and to our audience. We pride ourselves on having difficult conversations on this show, but that crossed a line. We should have handled that better. Sunny didn't apologize. She sat in silence, clearly not agreeing with Whoopi's assessment, but also not willing to publicly contradict her. The show continued, but the energy was off. Everyone could feel it. The remaining segments felt hollow, like everyone was just going through the motions until they could get off the air. When the show finally ended, the hosts dispersed quickly. There was none of the usual camaraderie or post-show chat. Everyone went their separate ways, lost in their own thoughts about what had just happened. In the makeup room, Joy Behar sat, getting her makeup removed. That was the most uncomfortable hour of television I've ever been a part of, she said to the makeup artist. Sarah Haynes was in the next chair over. Do you think Blake will ever come back? Joy laughed bitterly. Would you? Meanwhile, Sunny was in her dressing room, scrolling through her phone. The internet was already exploding with reactions to the confrontation. The opinions were split, but a significant portion of the commentary was critical of how she had handled the interview. She threw her phone down on the couch, frustrated. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She had legitimate points to make about the romanticization of rural America, about the way certain narratives get promoted while others get ignored. But now, all anyone was going to talk about was the fight. The substance would be lost in the spectacle. Ana Navarro knocked on Sunny's door. Can I come in? Sunny nodded, and Anna entered, closing the door behind her. That was rough, Anna said, sitting down next to Sunny. Everyone thinks I'm the bad guy, Sunny said quietly. Anna chose her words carefully. I don't think you're the bad guy, but I do think you let your passion override your judgment. Blake wasn't the enemy, Sunny. He was just a guy with a different perspective. A perspective that ignores a lot of problems, Sunny countered. Maybe, Anna conceded. But you never gave him a chance to engage with those problems. You came at him so hard from the beginning that he had no choice but to get defensive. Sunny was quiet for a long moment. I just get so frustrated when people act like small-town America is the only real America. Like the rest of us don't count. I know, Anna said sympathetically, but Blake never said that. You projected that onto him, and that's where things went wrong. Sunny knew Anna was right, but she wasn't ready to admit it out loud yet. Back at his hotel, Blake was on the phone with his wife, Gwen Stefani. You should have seen it, Gwen. It was wild. I can't believe you walked off, Gwen said, though her tone was supportive, not critical. What was I supposed to do? Blake asked. Sit there and let her keep coming at me? No, you did the right thing, Gwen assured him. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Blake smiled. Thanks, babe. I just hope people understand that I wasn't trying to cause drama. I just wasn't going to be disrespected like that. People will understand, Gwen said. The ones who matter, anyway. As the day wore on, the clip of Blake's confrontation with Sunny spread across the internet like wildfire. Everyone had an opinion. Some supported Blake, saying he had every right to leave when he was being attacked. Others supported Sunny, saying she was just asking tough questions that needed to be asked. Still others thought both of them had handled the situation poorly. But regardless of who people thought was right or wrong, everyone agreed on one thing. It was one of the most dramatic moments in The View's history. It was raw, it was real, and it was impossible to look away from. The next morning, the entertainment news shows were all covering the story. Clips of the confrontation played on loop. Body language experts analyzed every gesture. Former View hosts weighed in with their perspectives. Blake's phone was blowing up with messages of support from friends and fellow artists. Many of them had their own stories of interviews gone wrong, of feeling attacked or misrepresented by hosts with agendas. Sunny, meanwhile, was dealing with a different kind of reaction. While she had her supporters, she was also facing significant criticism for how she had handled the interview. Some of her colleagues at ABC were reportedly concerned about the optics of the situation. The View's producers held an emergency meeting to discuss what had happened and how to prevent similar situations in the future. There was talk of implementing new guidelines for guest interviews, of making sure hosts stayed focused on productive dialogue rather than personal attacks. Whoopi, who had been through countless controversies during her time on The View, knew that this one would blow over eventually. But she also knew it had revealed something important about the show's dynamics, about the fine line between passionate debate and destructive confrontation. For Blake, the incident became a defining moment. It showed his fans that he was willing to stand up for himself and his values, even when it wasn't comfortable or convenient. It showed the world that he wasn't just a character on television or in his music. He was a real person with real convictions and real boundaries. And for Sunny, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that passion without empathy can be destructive. That being right about the substance of your argument doesn't matter if your delivery makes it impossible for anyone to hear you. The confrontation between Blake Shelton and Sunny Hostin on The View lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish, but its impact would be felt for much longer. It sparked conversations about media bias, about rural versus urban divides, about how we talk to people we disagree with. Most importantly, it reminded everyone watching that behind the celebrity and the television personas, there are real people with real feelings. People who deserve to be treated with respect, even when we disagree with them. People who have the right to walk away when that respect is not forthcoming. Blake Shelton walked onto The View, set expecting a normal promotional interview. He walked off that set as someone who had drawn a line in the sand, who had said enough is enough, who had refused to play along with a dynamic that was fundamentally disrespectful. In the end, the most powerful moment of the entire confrontation was not any particular thing that was said. It was the moment Blake stood up and walked away. That simple act of self-respect, of knowing his worth, of refusing to be diminished, spoke louder than any words could have. It was a moment that resonated with millions of people who had ever felt talked down to, dismissed, or disrespected. It was a moment that said, you do not have to accept mistreatment, even from people in positions of power or authority. It was a moment that reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away.